This is episode 400 of the podcast. 400, which is fucking wild to say out loud. I just want to take a motherfucking moment of silence to thank myself, like a Snoop Dogg. Thank you. But also to thank you and to thank my husband publicly for being the rock behind why I've never quit. I'm coming to you with very tired eyes, a very tired mind, but a soul and heart so full right now. And what's crazy is I had an intuitive download that I wanted to record this episode before I went to the Powerhouse Women event this past weekend here in Phoenix, Arizona, with the one and only Lindsay Marie. This was the 10-year anniversary for the event. And I really was feeling like I wanted to be in my own energy while I recorded this particular episode. When typically for me, I'd want to do an episode after an event because I'd have downloads, takeaways, things I wanted to share and talk about. But I didn't end up doing it because I feel like I knew intuitively that there would be some takeaways and I would want to be in a different energy. And so here we are. It is Monday morning. This episode is dropping this week. This is the week of episode 400. So maybe that's why it feels more aligned to do it in the actual time in the week. I have an amazing producer. Shout out to Lynn, who always holds me down and lets me throw episodes at her last minute. We have so many cool things in store for you coming down the pipeline. I have a freebie that is dropping this week, all about building your authority online. And then we are relaunching the Start Your Dan podcast course. This is going to be a live 5-week accelerator that kicks off Monday next week, August 24th. So if you're listening to this podcast in real time and you have thought about starting your podcast, yes, I know you can go check out how to do it on YouTube. I know you can Google it. I know you can fuck with ChatGPT and get a step-by-step guide. But wouldn't you rather lock arms with somebody who is literally dropping episode 400 in this very minute while you launch episode 1? That's what we're talking about. That is my gift to you. I'm bringing this course back because it is not just about knowing how to do something. It is about having accountability and somebody who has gone before you, helping you with strategy, helping you figure out how to stay in the game. Many of you have great ideas. You know how to start stuff. That is not a problem. I literally spoke with one woman who I know has made tens of thousands of dollars in her business, has had corporate 6-figure career, can start anything. Literally say to me that she has 7 different businesses running right now. And the problem is she can't seem to lock in and click any of them over into the next level because she knows what it's going to require. And so she reached out to me and said, I think I'm ready to work with you. I know that you're the go-to person to help me make a decision and see it through. The compounding efforts of recording when I don't want to, when I don't quote unquote feel like it, when I don't have to. No one's going to fire me. No one's going to do shit if I don't record this podcast. But what's not going to happen is that people aren't going to know who I am. People aren't going to have an opportunity to build trust with me. People aren't going to have had an opportunity to spend 6 years with me on this show, guys. 6 years I have been sitting behind this microphone, behind this camera. That is crazy. And 400 of my own episodes on this show that has changed names 3 times since it first launched. I've had hundreds of conversations, thousands of hours have been spent thinking about what I believe, what I'm learning, what I'm questioning, and what exactly I want to say. That's one of the coolest things is like, during this process, I've learned so much about myself. I've made so many connections. It's opened doors for me to be on other people's podcasts, to teach inside other people's communities. And when I really started to think about what I wanted episode 400 to be, I knew I didn't want to do some like giant retrospective, like look back all about just the podcast. I didn't want to give you like 40 lessons from 400 episodes. I was trying to think like cute, whatever. But I really didn't want to turn this into something that was like a highlight reel. It felt like it needed to have a more grounded, solidified knowingness that like I've arrived here because I didn't quit. Now, that's not to say I didn't actually cute quit a couple times because I did. And if you follow the show for a while, you know I've taken 2 breaks during the time I've been podcasting. But in some seasons, I went as hard as 3 episodes a week, then down to 2. You know, when I kicked this off, I was doing 2 episodes a week, 1 guest, 1 solo. And then it was 1 guest one week, 1 solo the next week. The cadences look different, but the commitment to growing my online personal brand has never shifted. It's always been the thing I know needed to get time and attention from me if I was ever going to have bigger opportunities in my life, if I was ever going to build authority, if I was ever going to have a social presence that outweighed my one-to-one in-person 20-year career I've had in the beauty industry. I knew it was going to require a bigger version of me. And this show has allowed me to expand in so many ways, put me in front of people, like I said, that I would never otherwise get an hour of their time to ask them questions. And it's just, again, not about like what I've accomplished, but it's honestly, like I said, guys, it's what I've had to recognize was the thing is like some days you literally feel like you're starting over. You literally feel like you're starting over. And after a weekend like I just experienced, I felt both equally exhausted and equally fired the fuck up, like so locked into who I am, how I'm here to serve people, and why I'm the go-to person to help you build authority in the online space. Period, point blank, I'm locked in, I know who the fuck I am. Now, are there other people who do the same thing as me in the online space? Yes. Am I done worrying about what competition looks like or what consistency may look like for somebody else? Done. Done with the comparison because I've put in the work to be able to build this self-trust, this knowingness that I've got me. And that only comes with the time spent doing the thing. And I know you know what I'm talking about. But this podcast has transformed my business, my life, my identity, things I thought I wanted. Now it's in this situation where, yes, anything is possible, but I am so locked into how I'm here to serve. And if there's one thing I know that I didn't understand when I was younger, it's this. Starting over never really means you're starting from zero. It truly doesn't. Starting again, you're bringing every fucking thing you've learned with you. The distinction matters so much because I think one of the hardest things about making a big change later in life is that you already know what it feels like to be good at something. You know what it feels like to have experience, to have people trust you, to walk into a room and know what the fuck you're doing. And then one day, because we're wild women and we have ambition, we decide we want something different. Maybe you want a completely different career or you want to start a business. Maybe you already built the business and now you want to become the face of it. You want to write the book, start speaking, start coaching, launch a podcast, build a personal brand. Maybe you want to sell the company you spent 20 years building and figure out who the hell you are without it. And suddenly you feel new again. It is very humbling. It is so humbling. If you know, pause this podcast right now and send me a message of like how you feel when I say that, because there are so many women in my world that is their current reality, especially inside my mastermind right now. Being new when you're young is like normal. It's expected. But being new after you already experienced success somewhere else is completely different. It's a completely different mind fuck, isn't it? Because your brain keeps comparing your chapter 1 here to your chapter 20 over there. And how unfair is that? It's so unfair, but it is the reality of it. And you start thinking, why am I not better at this? Well, because you've been doing it for 5 fucking minutes, right? You've been doing it for 5 minutes. Or you've toe dipped, or you've started dabbling, posting a few things on social media. You know you're not incapable. You just have to remind yourself that you're new. I've had to have that conversation with myself so many times. I really thought it was going to be a lateral move from 6 figures over here to 6 figures over there, and I wouldn't miss a beat. I forgot the whole part where you have to rebuild your identity and belief in yourself before anybody else is going to believe it about you. No one tells you that part. Nobody talks about that part. And I have been thinking about this so much lately because it is literally happening right in front of my eyes inside House of Influence. I have this room full of incredible women. I mean, this is my job. I can't even some days, but I'm like, yeah, no, I can because I have worked my ass off to curate this type of business for myself because I know how important it is and how it feels to be in this situation because I was them. Already doing big things, already have a big life. They've already done such incredible things with their life. These are not women who need to learn how to work hard or become successful. They know how to do that. You probably know how to do that. They've had careers and businesses and they have expertise and reputations behind them. But almost every single one of them, in fact, I think pretty much every single one of them, is in some version of a new beginning right now. A new identity shift, a new reality. Most of them are building their personal brands or figuring out what they want to be known for outside of the thing that they have been known for professionally before. Some are moving into the coaching space or stepping into speaking, sharing their thought leadership. Some of them are building businesses, but asking, like, is this really the direction that I want to continue going? What happens if I don't do this? Who am I then? Who am I if I don't do this current thing forever? And getting to watch them kind of wrestle with that is something that I don't take lightly, because I know internally, viscerally, what that feels like. I get to watch these incredibly accomplished women feel new again, which is fascinating because I could also see why they sometimes can't see it yet. They can't see that they're literally starting from scratch. They're bringing they're starting from scratch, but they're not starting from scratch, right? Like, they're bringing with them decades of life and business experience, but into a new arena, which feels like you're starting from scratch. But watching them start to realize all of that has been pretty fucking badass, because we've now been in the mastermind just about 3 months, and there's like this shift happening. There's like this energetic frequency click up, notch up, where there's like a reckoning of all the stories and the beliefs that they had coming into the mastermind about themselves that they wanted to be true so bad. They had receipts on that shit. They're like, oh, actually, I was full of shit. That's not true. The things I told myself about how I can show up, who I am, how confident I can be moving into this new phase of my life. It's, I just, I'm just, I know I'm recording right now, but I'm just like thinking in real time, because they know they're capable. That is never an issue. Capability, I mean, doctors, lawyers, high-level real estate moguls, med spa owners, seven-figure salon owners. Just like the list goes on of the power in this room. But also knowing that you don't have to have all the answers, and that you have the capability, the confidence, and the desire to rebuild in a different arena. It's not, I know exactly what I'm doing. It's, I don't know exactly what I'm doing yet, but I trust myself enough to figure it out. There is a massive difference between those two things. And if I could go back and give the women one piece of advice, and even myself, if I could go back and give myself one piece of advice, it would probably be that. I don't know exactly what I'm doing yet, but I trust myself enough to figure it out. And that's exactly what I had to do in order to start this podcast. I wouldn't have wanted a better strategy. And I don't give my clients better strategies or some arbitrary roadmap how to grow a podcast faster, right? That's what I would have probably wanted back then. I wouldn't have told her where any of this was going, because how could I know? How could I know where you're going? I can see what you've shown me that you're capable of, but only you truly know. And if I was to just guess the ending for you, and you thought that was the only way, how many things would you miss in the interim? Here's what I'd probably tell her. You don't need to know where this is going to lead. You just need to trust yourself enough to keep going. Because when you're at the beginning of something, you have no fucking idea what you're actually building. You don't. And you don't know who's going to hear you or who you're going to meet. And you definitely don't know what doors are going to open or what opportunities are going to come from it. Trust me, if you listen to this podcast for a while, you've heard some of my wild stories. You have no idea which random conversation is going to turn into a friendship, a client, a really cool collaboration, an introduction, or create an idea that changes the trajectory of your fucking life. And you most certainly, just lean in and listen to this, you most certainly don't know who you're going to become because you just kept showing up. All you know is what's happening right now. And usually in the beginning, what's happening right now doesn't look very impressive. Nobody is really clapping yet. They might even be questioning you. That's the part people really struggle with. I mean, I know I did. Everybody wants the opportunities to come from being known, but truthfully, nobody really wants to sit in the season of becoming known. I'm going to say that again. Everybody wants the opportunities that come from being known. But I believe the hardest part to get through is the season of becoming known. Because becoming known requires doing a lot of work before there is evidence that the work is working. And I know that's frustrating. You know, I know. I talk about it all the time on this podcast, on social media, whenever I get to teach or be in person. It's one of the main reasons I kept this podcast going for so long. I want to be able to share in real time. Like I said, today is Monday. This episode is dropping this week. What this actually looks like so you know you're not alone. I fucking know how cringe it feels to post something and nobody really comment or like on it. I know what it feels like to put episodes out for this podcast and get barely any downloads. You start the thing, you put out an offer, and nobody buys or seems even remotely interested. And it's a shame that your audience just doesn't appear overnight for your podcast. I'm glad it doesn't, because I know the work works on me just as much as it's working on everybody else. But my personal favorite right now is making videos that you post and nobody sees them, or you get 400 people to watch it while someone else basically makes the same thing and goes viral overnight, right? 4 million views. You're like, well, I post that same stuff. Of course, our brains go there. I know comparison is a real thing. I'm not an idiot. And you start thinking, what am I even doing? Why am I doing any of this? Am I crazy for doing some of this? Am I too old to be doing some of this? Who am I to do this? Everybody else is doing this. There's so much noise out there. And you ask yourself, am I wasting my time? Did I pick the wrong path? Should I even keep trying? Maybe I should try something else. Maybe this isn't for me. But I think sometimes we ask the question, is this working, way too early? Because looking back now, right? Things are much more clear when I look back versus trying to see looking forward. Sometimes the better question is, have I done this long enough to find out the answers to any of those questions? Because you cannot demand evidence from something you haven't devoted to long enough to see compound. You really can't. And that alone might be one of the biggest lessons these 400 podcast episodes have taught me. The compounding work is incredibly boring and nuanced and non-scalable while it's happening. You don't wake up one morning and feel your reputation getting stronger. It doesn't happen like that. Though, I will tell you, after my experience over the last 2 days in this room, I have been putting myself in personal development rooms around mostly all females for, what are we going on, 10 years? 10 years, guys. And I started the podcast 6 years ago. And I started coaching about 6.5, almost 7 years ago in the online space. I have been a female mentor and a male mentor in the beauty industry space for 25 plus years. I have taught, coached, and even in the sports world, I was a personal trainer for 10 years. I'll tell you, every day is different. You know, in this kind of a business, in a different kind of business, you don't just wake up one morning and like, this all makes sense. There are moments where that happens. And this past weekend was a compounding moment where I had so many people walk up to me, whether it was running into them at the bathroom, the line at lunch, when we first walked in, when we're standing in line to get coffee, come and say hi to me because they recognized me. Oh, hey, Jessica, my name's so-and-so. I listen to your podcast. Hey, I saw you on so-and-so's podcast. Hey, I wanted to say hi. I saw that you were here. Some of the women I recognized, many of them I didn't. You don't become known by not showing up and staying in the game. It doesn't happen that way. It really doesn't. There isn't some notification that pops up on your phone saying, congrats, people trust you more today than they did 6 months ago. You don't really notice your network expanding or your authority growing while it's happening, because most of the time it just feels like you're doing the work. Like right now, I'm sitting here on my computer by myself in a room at my husband's building while people are walking and talking behind me. This feels like work. It doesn't feel like, expansion. It's recording another episode. It's sending another email. It's showing up to another event. It's having that conversation, making yourself available to actually have a potential connection. And none of those things individually feel particularly life-changing on a random Monday. Until you look back, like I'm getting to do with you guys right now. And suddenly, here we are, 400 fucking episodes later. And this is what I'm talking about by compounding the work. It's not that episode 400 is somehow more important than episode 52 or episode 11. It's that episode 400 exists because all of those other ones happened first. 400 is evidence. It's my receipt that I have stayed in the game and not stayed in as I stubbornly kept doing exactly the same for 6 years. God, no. If you've been here long enough, you know how many times I've changed my mind, changed the show, changed what I talk about, experimented, pivoted, and tried shit that absolutely did not work. But I stayed in the conversation. I kept being curious. I kept learning and meeting people and allowing the podcast to evolve as I evolved. I have allowed my personal brand and how I show up on social media to do the exact same. And eventually, all of those little decisions became something much bigger than a podcast because the podcast didn't just build an audience, it built options. And that might be the one thing I want you to hear the most. Consistency doesn't just build an audience, consistency builds options. I'm going to say that again. Consistency doesn't just build an audience, it builds options. And when I think about what actually has come from doing this for 6 years, it's almost impossible to trace it back anymore, to be honest with you. Someone heard an episode and introduced me to someone else. A guest became a friend. A friendship led to a room I never would have been in. That's happened so many times. Someone in that room became a client, or lots of people. All of my current clients have come from a variety of different rooms I've been in. Conversations that sparked business ideas. I got to hear one of my brilliant friends who runs a podcast agency tell me about what he's creating as we walked out the door at the end of a 3-day conference. And my mind just exploded with pride and joy for this human that has, been there for everybody and done so much work in his life to get to this point where he can confidently say, I'm stepping into this. Like, hearing him gave me confidence to go and do my things, right? These little incremental moments of time are so monumental when you really stop and think about it. That's how all this shit actually works. It's not linear. And how boring would it be if it was? That'd be so freaking boring anyways. It'd be so boring. And I tell you, there wasn't one magical episode for this podcast that changed everything, nor was there a magical time where I was on someone else's podcast that quote unquote changed everything. It was hundreds of little things that stacked on top of each other until eventually I built this reputation and this body of work that speaks for itself before I even walk into rooms. And to me, that's what actual authority is. You don't build authority because one day everybody suddenly decides you're an authority. You build it by leaving enough evidence kind of behind that eventually it becomes really hard to argue with. Your work will start to speak for you. And for me, I feel like my reputation arrives before I do. Hence why people recognize me or know something about me. People start telling other people about you. And that's when the momentum hits just a little different. And that's where you start to feel the actual speed of all of the work you've done lock in. Anybody I know who's gotten to the point where things just quote unquote popped off, put in 10 years of work you didn't see, or maybe you did see because they were smart enough to document the process, like Gary Vee and so many other creators online. But the real problem is that most people never stay long enough to experience this part. They do something for a couple months, nothing really huge happens, and they assume they picked the wrong thing. So they change the offer, or maybe even change their entire audience or the platform or their entire fucking business. I've seen it. I've seen it a million times. Some people want to call it shiny object syndrome. Some people want to call it out of alignment. Some people want to call it resistance. And listen, there's nothing wrong with pivoting. God loves, I know, a good pivot. He does. Sometimes I think they're mostly his fault. But there's a difference between evolving something because you have never really got the evidence or that you don't have all the information. But if you just abandon things before they even have a chance to give you any sort of data or real results because it didn't come fast enough, that's a you thing. You have to give something long enough to become something, which brings me all the way back to this idea of starting over because I actually think we use that phrase incorrectly. I do. When I started moving into this chapter of my career, I didn't erase decades I had already spent working. I didn't. Think about what that actually means. Tens of thousands of appointments, decades spent sitting across from women, talking to them about their lives, hearing what they were worried about, watching what happened when their confidence changed, learning how people make decisions and how relationships are built. Then there was the business side of it, learning how to sell, lead, deal with people, make money, lose money, make good decisions, make some really shitty decisions, and then figure out how to recover from them. All of that came with me. I didn't know how useful all of it would be when I was living in it, but that's kind of the point, guys. A previous version of your life doesn't become irrelevant just because you decide you want something different. It becomes material, like your literal experience. It becomes perspective. It becomes the thing that allows you to enter a completely new space without actually being a completely new person. That's why I don't believe most of us are starting over. I don't. We're integrating. We're taking everything we've lived and asking, what does all of this become now? And I think that question becomes especially interesting for women in midlife because there is this weird pressure to have it all figured out by now. Like at some arbitrary age, you're supposed to pick the final version of yourself and just stay there. Can I get a universal fuck that? Fuck that. Say it louder for the people in the back. Some of the most interesting women I know are changing their minds right now. Full on. They're leaving things they used to want. A lot of them are getting curious about things they have absolutely no quote unquote credentials for yet. They're looking at successful careers or businesses and admitting that that success doesn't automatically mean they have to want that thing forever. And I think that takes a pair of fucking balls because sometimes staying is exactly the easier choice. Everybody already understands who you are there. You know how to win there. Starting again means being willing to temporarily give up some of that certainty, or a lot of that certainty. But your previous success doesn't obligate you to stay where you are. It doesn't. And being inexperienced in whatever comes next does not disqualify you from going after it. You're new here. You're not new. Remember that. You may be new here, but you are not new. Everything you've already lived is coming with you. Pack that fucking bag. And I think that's probably why beginnings feel so different for me now. I used to look at a beginning and see all the things I didn't know. Now I look at the beginning of something and think, I wonder what the fuck this could turn into. That energy will completely shift your life because I have 400 episodes worth of evidence that I cannot predict what happens when I keep going. And I don't want to be able to predict all of it anymore. I want to build a life with options. That to me is one of the greatest things this podcast has ever given me. Not certainty, that's for sure. Opportunity. I have relationships and ideas and opportunities available to me that I could not have manufactured 6 years ago. I didn't even know they existed yet. And that is why if you're listening to episode 400 while you're somewhere near your own episode 4, maybe, I really want you to hear me. You may just be standing in the part of the story where there isn't enough evidence yet. That's it. That's it. Nobody's clapping yet, but it doesn't mean nobody ever will. Feeling like a beginner doesn't mean you made the wrong decision. Not knowing exactly where this is going doesn't mean you shouldn't go. It might just be a little early for there to be any evidence or data. So keep leaving that evidence. And I don't mean blindly keep doing something that isn't working for 10 years because Jess told you consistency matters. Use your brain. Pay attention. Adjust. Get better. Study your tape. Talk to your people. Change the strategy when the strategy needs changing, but don't confuse the discomfort of being new with evidence that you don't belong there. Those are two completely different things. Keep creating, keep meeting people, keep putting yourself in rooms and keep letting people see what you're becoming. And document that shit because your business will never outgrow your willingness to be seen. And I'm starting to believe your life might not either. And while you're figuring all this out, pay attention to who's around you. This has become really obvious to me watching the women in my mastermind because one of the coolest things happening in that room has almost nothing to do with me. It's watching them become that person for each other. They're watching each other try things. They're celebrating wins, obviously, but they're also there for the weird middle part when someone isn't sure if the thing is working yet. And I think we understand how valuable that is. Everybody wants people around when they win. Find the people who are excited about you while you're still figuring it the fuck out. The people you can send the thing to and say, okay, I finally fucking posted it. the friend who listens to your episode, your first episode, when you don't have any audience yet, and in fact, reshares it. The person who reminds you, hey, you are actually really fucking good at this, when you temporarily forgot because you're comparing yourself to someone who's been doing it for 10 years. Those people matter. And be that person for other people too, because nobody builds anything meaningful completely alone. Which brings us all the way back to 400. I am absolutely celebrating this. 400 episodes is a big freaking deal, and I'm really proud of myself, and I don't say that lightly. I'm proud that I started it, obviously, but I'm probably more proud that I kept going through all the versions of myself that have existed between episode 1 and episode 400. And if you listen to one episode or 100, or somehow you've been here for all 400, thank you. Seriously. The fact that you gave me your time really matters to me. The messages you send when something hits you, the episodes you send to your friends that I don't even know about, the conversations that have happened because something I said made you think a little bit differently about something in your own life. That is the coolest part of all of this. And I'm just soaking it all in. But episode 400 doesn't feel like proof that I made it. It feels like proof that I stayed long enough to find out what could happen. And now I get to do it again. I have no idea what the next 400 episodes are going to bring. And for probably the first time in my life, I really don't need to know. I'm going to change my mind again. That's a fact. I'm going to start new things. Have you met me? I'm going to stop things. And I'm going to become a beginner at something else. There will probably be things I'm completely convinced are going to work that absolutely flop. There will be random things I barely think twice about that change my entire life. I know that now. And that's what makes this next chapter so fucking exciting. Because at this point, I trust myself enough to know I'll figure it out. So yes, today is a huge win. And today we're absolutely celebrating 400 episodes. But I'm not just hanging out here partying by myself, thinking I've reached some pinnacle, because I'm not done. I actually feel like I'm just getting started. 400 down, 3,600 to go. I'll see you at 4,000. If this episode resonated with you, if you felt this in your bones and you were like, I want to create that for myself, the Start Your Damn Podcast course is kicking off August 24th. It is a 5-week accelerator. We meet once weekly. I am going to give you everything I have, everything I've learned from every podcaster I've ever met, some of which are my dearest friends who have reached 85 million downloads on their shows, some of which who have 50,000 downloads. Ones that are creating impacts, because I don't believe everybody needs a podcast, but I do believe everybody needs a platform. And if this is a platform you choose to go all in on, I guarantee the ripple effect from the podcast can create everything else as far as content that you need to build authority online. We are in a trust recession right now. Having a podcast builds deep trust, deep know, like, and trust. This one episode can reach millions of people. Doing one-to-one work, I can't do that. That is why I took myself out of the brick and mortar day-to-day space and decided to push myself. Did I know exactly what would come of it? No. But after listening to this podcast episode, you can understand why. I am so committed to helping you figure out what platform to go all in on. That is why House of Influence exists, my mastermind, which is relaunching in the fall in October. And I'm going full bore with the podcast course again, because teaching you how to be a great guest is a huge part of marketing your own personal show. You get to be both and. The podcast space is not oversaturated. The world is craving authenticity right now. You speaking your truth, you being a real human, creating real human content. That's not going anywhere. No piece of AI scripted slop will ever replace your intuitive download channel thinking. Stop outsourcing your knowingness and let that shit flow. A podcast can be the most epic, beautiful space to do that. Did I script out some of today's podcast? Yes, because I didn't want to miss anything. I wrote this letter to myself and created a podcast script out of it. There are so many ways to strategically streamline and batch out content. So if you're thinking, I don't have time, I don't know how could I do all the things and continue doing what I'm doing? I have kids, I have businesses, I have family, I have health issues, whatever it might be. If you wait until you feel ready, you're never going to be ready. You're never going to have the time. Now is the time. Document the process, share the struggle. Let people in to see why you're the go-to person to help them through whatever they're going through. You don't have to be a seasoned 20-year expert to help one person. Knowing that I might potentially help one person with every episode is what keeps me going. It's what keeps me in the game with social media, sharing my thought content. Because if one person hears a story or reads a post or listens to my podcast and I help them that day, that is my why. And I bet your why is the same. So if you're ready, check out the links below in the show notes. I am so fired up. You are getting 6 years of me figuring out the online space in 5 weeks. There is one-to-one available with this as well. There is done with you, done for you available with my team. We got you. No more excuses. Let's fucking go.